Plato's Sophist is one of the most confusing of all of Plato's dialogues. The discussion is led by a foreign visitor from Alia rather than by Socrates. The twists and turns he drags the young Theaetetus through make it clear very quickly why this dialogue is called the Sophist. Yet woven throughout this tongue-in-cheek exchange are some meaningful insights into various philosophical issues, such as being and non-being. This is a rich dialogue, with many topics worth thinking about. What I have decided to focus on today is a section on dialectic, which treats dialectic specifically as a means of purification. Here is how the Eleatic visitor, or stranger as he's called, broaches this topic. In all the previously named processes, either like has been separated from like, or the better from the worse. I see now what you mean. There is no name for the first kind of separation. Of the second, which throws away the worse and preserves the better, I do know a name. What is it? Every discernment or discrimination of that kind, as I have observed, is called a purification. He says of the dialectic art, her endeavor is to know what is and is not kindred in all arts, with a view to the acquisition of intelligence, and having this in view, she honors them all alike. He separates purifications into two categories. There's purification of the body and purification of the soul. Now you can probably guess which of the two categories the Eleatic stranger is interested in. The art of dialectic is in no wise particular about fine words. If she may be only allowed to have a general name for all other purifications, binding them up together and separating them off from the purification of the soul or intellect. For this is the purification at which she wants to arrive, and this we should understand to be her aim. Now, the purifications of the body include any that care for the body's health and its outward care. But the stranger's aim is to discuss separating the better from the worse in the soul. Then any taking away of evil from the soul may be properly called purification? Yes. Now I just want to point out here that Plato did not hold the Christian notion of evil. Those of you who have been watching my videos for a while have undoubtedly heard me talk about this, so I do apologize for the repetition. But for viewers who are new to my videos, I should say a few words on this. Evil in the soul is, for the Platonists, not an inherent condition. Nobody is inherently evil. Evil for Plato is more in the sense of unhealthy. Now, the aim of philosophy, of course, is to bring us to a state of being a healthy soul. As for what it means to be an unhealthy soul, the Eleatic stranger is going to present two categories of this unhealthiness. And in the soul, there are two kinds of evil. What are they? The one may be compared to disease in the body, the other to deformity. And lucky for us, Theaetetus replies, I do not understand. But we can see at least that there are two kinds of evil or unhealthiness in the body. He is calling them disease and deformity. First, he describes the analog in the soul to disease in the body. And do we not see that opinion is opposed to desire, pleasure to anger, reason to pain, and that all these elements are opposed to one another in the souls of bad men? Certainly. And yet they must all be akin? Of course. then we shall be right in calling vice a discord and disease of the soul. And so a soul that is overcome by pleasure and pain is one that lacks temperance and courage and the other virtues. This lack of virtue he calls vice. What disease is to the body, then, vice is to the soul. The second type of evil in the soul he compares to deformity in the body. And when things having motion and aiming at an appointed mark continually miss their aim and glance aside, shall we say that this is the effect of symmetry among them, or of the want of symmetry? Clearly of the want of symmetry. But surely we know that no soul is voluntarily ignorant of anything? Certainly not. And what is ignorance but the aberration of a mind which is bent on truth and in which the process of understanding is perverted? True. Then we are to regard a foolish soul as deformed and devoid of symmetry? Very true. And so ignorance is the name given to this missing the mark. And ignorance is to the soul what deformity is to the body. Now, because there are two forms of what he calls evil, there must also be two corrective arts to address these evils. And in the case of the body, are there not two arts which have to do with the two bodily states? What are they? There is gymnastics, which has to do with deformity, and medicine, which has to do with disease. True. So now there is more going on in our chart here. Medicine and gymnastics are named as the arts that deal with disease and deformity in the body. And so now he has to address vice and ignorance in the soul. Hence, for insolence and injustice and cowardice is not the corrective art the one of all arts most closely related to justice? Probably it is, at least according to the judgment of mankind. And for all sorts of ignorance, is there any art it would be more correct to suggest than that of instruction? No, none. So something related to justice is named to overcome vice. This is very much in line with the teachings on developing virtue in Book 4 of Plato's Republic. And to overcome ignorance, some form of instruction is needed. But instruction, the Eleatic stranger insists, can, again, be divided into two categories. And of the art of instruction, shall we say that there is one or many kinds? At any rate, there are two principal ones. Think. They decide to divide ignorance into two categories. That will make it easier to assign the proper mode of instruction to each one. The stranger then recognizes the larger of the two categories. I do seem to myself to see one very large and bad sort of ignorance which is quite separate, and may be weighed in the scale against all other sorts of ignorance put together. What is it? When a person supposes that he knows and does not know, this appears to be the great source of all the errors of the intellect. True. And this is the famous double ignorance, not knowing that you don't know. As for all the other sorts of ignorance, those are not really relevant to Plato. There are many things that you don't know and don't care about not knowing. How many gallons of water are in the Atlantic Ocean? Or as another example, there are many things that you don't know, but it is no problem because you know that you don't know them. Like if you have never read the Sophist, or if you read it so long ago that you forgot what it's about, then you know that you don't know it. So you can read it. Problem solved. Or maybe your car breaks down. Do you know how to fix a car? Now, it's possible that someone listening to this does. I don't know how, though. I would have to pay to get my car fixed. It is an inconvenience and an expense, but it's not a huge problem. A bigger problem would be if I thought that I could fix it myself, even though I don't know how. That's when people run into problems and they have parts spread out all over and then realize they don't know how to put it all back together. So Plato was not concerned about ignorance involving things that don't matter to your state of mind, like how much water is in an ocean, or about things that we know we don't know. It is only that double ignorance that really stings us and causes problems in our lives. Theaetetus recognizes the type of instruction necessary to rid a person of this form of ignorance. The instruction which you mean, stranger, is, I should imagine, not the teaching of handicraft arts, but what, thanks to us, has been termed education in this part of the world. Now, the word education is the Greek word paideia. This is not education in the sense of the kind of instruction that we get when we go to school. Paideia is more like a yoga, a spiritual discipline. And this same word, by the way, is also used at the opening of Plato's allegory of the cave. Socrates introduces the allegory by saying that it illustrates education, paideia, and its lack. So there is a spiritual discipline that is needed to get out of the cave. And we are seeing here in the Sophist that some sort of spiritual discipline is what is needed to overcome the ignorance of thinking you know what you do not know. What exactly this methodology is yet to be clarified. The Eleatic stranger sees two forms that education can take. There is the time-honored mode which our fathers commonly practiced toward their sons, and which is still adopted by many, either of roughly reproving their errors or of gently advising them, which varieties may be correctly included under the general term of admonition. True. And so admonition is the first method of education. Not everybody takes well to this, though. It is especially likely to be rejected if the person still does not see that they had made a mistake, if they still think that they know something that they don't. And so there is a need for a second method. It is a harsher method, but it is done with compassion. They set to work to eradicate the spirit of conceit in another way. In what way? Now, the explanation that follows is a bit long, but I think it is worth presenting in whole. They cross-examine a man's words when he thinks that he is saying something and is really saying nothing, and easily convict him of inconsistencies in his opinions. These they then collect by the dialectic process, and placing them side by side, show that they contradict one another about the same things, in relation to the same things, and in the same respect. He, seeing this, is angry with himself, and grows gentle toward others, and thus is entirely delivered from great prejudices and harsh notions, in a way which is most amusing to the hearer, and produces the most lasting good effect on the person who is the subject of the operation. For as the physician considers that the body will receive no benefit from taking food until the internal obstacles have been removed, so the purifier of the soul is conscious that his patient will receive no benefit from the application of knowledge until he is refuted, and from refutation learns modesty. He must be purged of his prejudices first, and made to think that he knows only what he knows, and no more. And of course, all of this applies to women as well, both the person being cross-examined and the purifier of the soul. And so Plato is showing here that one use of dialectic is to purify people of ignorance. And we see a bit into how to do it. It is done through cross-examination, putting a person's views side by side to highlight the inconsistencies. This is what has come to be known as the Socratic method. And as it is described by the Eleatic stranger, this can be amusing to the hearer and also to us as the readers. However, that is not the point of it. And this is something that is often misunderstood about Plato's dialogues and about Socrates. He was not mocking people. The point is not to be clever or to outwit an opponent. That type of combative argumentation is an abuse of the Socratic method. No, Socrates was not acting from a place of wanting to cut other people down just for the fun of it. He was not acting from what we might call the ego. He was acting from the soul. And so he was guided by compassion, challenging his interlocutors to see more clearly, and so to live more in line with truth and goodness. As is stated here, this process produces the most lasting good effect on the person who is the subject of the operation. The Eleatic stranger goes on to say, "For all these reasons, Theaetetus, we must admit that refutation is the greatest and chiefest of purifications, and he who has not been refuted, though he be the great king himself, is in an awful state of impurity. He is uninstructed and deformed in those things in which he who would be truly blessed ought to be most beautiful and purest." And so this is Socrates' art, to deliver his interlocutors into the modest recognition that they know only what they know and no more. Theaetetus says of this condition, "That is certainly the best and wisest state of mind." Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this section of the Sophist. And as always, I thank you for watching. Till next time.